Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. My first point is to urge you to consider, if you're anywhere near the New York area, think of attending the Left Forum, which is being held on Friday the 7th, Saturday the 8th, and Sunday the 9th of June at Pace University, downtown Manhattan, by City Hall. City Hall subway stops will get you there, Pace University. And at noon, high noon on Sunday, I'm going to be part of a panel along with the distinguished INN radio host Tom Kiley and J.C. Calhoun of Denver, Colorado, once and future congressional candidate, according to some, and a group of others will be there. And I urge you to come. I'd say if that's essentially, if you're hearing this on Saturday, you can come over on Sunday. The more the merrier. So that's number one. Now, the strategic situation, it's extremely interesting. And we have the following conjunction, the following situation of a number of factors converging. Number one, Qusair, the fall of the main death squad fortress, the Stalingrad of the death squads and terrorists and jihadis of Nusra and the Al-Qaeda forces coming in from Iraq and the jihadis from all over the world, Taliban, Somalis, Chechens, Libyans, basically every terrorist on the planet has undergone the gravitational pull of the war on Syria, launched by NATO with the help of the Israelis and financed by Saudi, by Qatar, by the other reactionary Gulf monarchies. This city has now fallen. This is Stalingrad. From now on, in my view, unless something outside happens, it's all downhill for the death squads. This was a battle of annihilation. It was a battle of encirclement. Hezbollah coming in from the west and the Syrian army coming in from the east. Syrian Air Force active, heavy bombardment, many, many terrorists killed. The Syrian army is killing more terrorists than the U.S. ever dreamed of. And these are real, honest-to-God terrorists. Now, of course, they're not capable of flying planes into buildings, but they can kill lots of women and children. As I've always said, they can blow up a bus. They can blow up a supermarket. They can snipe at women and children, as I've heard in the streets of Homs. So they're cowards, but they're murderous cowards. So these people have now gotten part of what's coming to them. But, of course, that's an entire CIA secret army that has been put on the road to annihilation. I mean, you can see from now on, the government forces are gaining at Damascus. The government forces are gaining near Aleppo. The government forces are going to be in a strong position in Homs. And the rebels, I think, are going to tend to be driven back to a narrow band along the Turkish border, and even that area is now in some question because, as we will talk about, one of the main issues, probably the main issue of these protests against Erdogan is that he has thrown open the doors of Turkey to terrorists of every stripe from all over the world. We reported already last year, if you were a tourist in Iskenderun, Turkey, in that port, you would go into your five-star hotel and there'd be some bearded butcher fresh off the plane or the boat from Libya in the next room with God knows what kind of weapons and so forth in the elevator. So this is bad news. And, of course, the Nusra brigades have brought sarin, poison gas. They've set bombs. They've obviously, robbed a lot of people, kidnapped a lot of people. This is a plague of locusts. These are the enemies or some of the enemies of civilization in our time. So there have been demonstrations in southern Turkey for months and months and months calling on Erdogan, get these terrorists off our back, get them out of here. And Erdogan, with Obama whispering in his ear about the future greatness of the Turkic empire, the Turanian empire, right? It goes all the way to the North Pole and the gates of China, according to these megalomaniacs. Well, that's a bridge too far, I think. Erdogan in big trouble. So even the logistics, the hinterland, the logistical depth of the death squads is now in danger for that reason. And now we get to the central issue. The British and the French. The Entente Cordiale of 1904, created by King Edward VII, the main architect of the First World War, even though he had died by the time it broke out, he created this alliance system in Europe that led to this monstrosity of World War I. Out of that comes fascism, World War II, Cold War, and we're just coming up for air. But now our dear friends want to plunge us back into chaos, because if you're the British oligarchy, that's the only way you can survive. So the Entente Cordiale of 1904, the Anglo-French, the Sykes-Picot powers, the people who designed this Middle East, remember the peace to end all peace? They're the ones who did this, all of these dysfunctional borders and whatever, and obviously we don't want to change them now because they've been around for almost 100 years. And Suez, 1956, the withered mummy of British imperialism and the withered mummy of French Vichy imperialism. And it is interesting to see the role of so-called French socialist politicians, vaguely leftists, people like Guy Mollet, Mendes France, people like this in the colonial wars of France. They're very bad, and that seems to be what we have now with Hollande and Fabius, right? We have the Vichy nostalgia, right? The desire for the French Empire. And it took de Gaulle a long time to get around to this, but de Gaulle actually finally concluded that the empire is a millstone around your neck. It's an albatross. You don't want it. It doesn't help you. It deprives you of all the trump cards you have in the world political situation. But this does not stop. Cameron, Haig, Hollande, Fabius are demanding that Obama attack Syria. This is the main point of world politics right now. The hysterical campaign of the Anglo-French imperialists, London and Paris, the governments, but the entire establishment, and you see this reaches into so-called left news organs like The Guardian and so forth. They are operating to try to push Obama into this disastrous war. And I call upon anybody of goodwill, but in the United States in particular, and I also would hope that Russia would recognize this situation and do everything possible. It is imperative that Obama not be pushed into this. It's clear that he doesn't want to do it. He wants to lead from behind, right? His policy, as developed by Zbigniew Brzezinski and others, is buck passing. If you want to get rid of Syria, you get the French and the British to attack Syria. Well, why don't they do it then? Obviously, because they're afraid. They know they will lose. They know that their rickety aviation will be decimated by those S-300s, and the older models are there already, make no mistake. And their one aircraft carrier is going to get sent to the bottom by one of those Yakontsk missiles, and they'll be dealing with a Russian squadron in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is also not what they bargained for. These are imperialists, but it's a very peculiar kind of imperialist, right? They're cringing in regard to the powerful, but then they're running wild, trampling on the weak. So they're always eager to find defenseless targets. This, of course, extends into the U.S. establishment, too. But in the case of the Anglo-French, it's even more marked. Now, remember, the Anglo-French are one unit. They have signed various deals where they have essentially merged their military. Neither one can act without the other. So that's what you're dealing with. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, reminding you that my New York City appearance is scheduled for Sunday at noon. That's Sunday, June 9th at Pace University in the framework of the Left Forum, noon to 2, panel with Tom Kiley and J.C. Calhoun. You can find it at the very detailed website. And this is a big event, right? 1,500 speakers, several thousand people attending. The strategic situation in a nutshell. The entire destabilization of Syria is on the brink of collapse. The death squads, the killers, the jihadis, the enemies of civilization have received a catastrophic defeat with the fall of Qusair, thanks to Hezbollah and the Syrian army. Qusair is now liberated. It can no longer be used for gun running and other illegal activities. It's interesting. The Anglo-French wanted to have a UN resolution condemning the fall of Qusair, and Russia said, why didn't you have a resolution the first time around when the death squads took over? There you weren't worried. Now you're worried. The legal government of a UN member state has re-extended its administration. And you're going to find that people who have been in Qusair, people who have been in parts of Aleppo, the misrule, the reign of terror, the hell on earth created by these bearded lunatics is something that anybody would like to get away from. The business classes of Damascus and Aleppo, even the Sunnis, above all the Sunnis, have no interest in going under the yoke of those lunatic fundamentalists. So that's the number one datum. The second datum is the British and the French are totally hysterical, and they're inventing things left and right. Oh, we just hear today, 2 French journalists captured in Syria. Yeah, who captured them? We don't know. Chemical weapons used in Syria. Yeah, who used them? Was it the government, or more likely, was it the death squads? Since they're losing, they're much more likely to run this danger. And, of course, we have the impudent Fabius with his impudence and arrogance, essentially giving orders to the United States. Get in there and fight. The Anglo-French, as always, willing to fight to the last American, eager to fight to the last American. And, of course, they imagine themselves the mummified colonialism of Paris and London. And this is now one unit, as I've stressed. They imagine themselves as the principal beneficiaries of this operation. As we saw in Libya, the British and the French cannot act independently of one another. They have now merged and interlocked their rickety military capabilities, right? They don't duplicate them. They merge them because they're so broke that this is the only way they can keep, their one aircraft carrier, and then the British provide things that the French don't. So you can't have one without the other. We want neither one. We're calling on Obama to repudiate with prejudice the lunatic, hysterical claims of London and Paris in regard to Syria. There will be no reimposition of an imperialist Sykes-Picot yoke in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is an anti-historical monstrosity. As General MacArthur said, the era of imperialism is over, and it may not be revived. It's impossible. You can't do it. But the British and the French, they don't give up. They use scandals, and this is the secret of the last couple of days. We've just had 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, 2 scandals. The flagship of this operation is, unfortunately, the London Guardian, center-left, right? More able to get in with Obama's base because of so-called left-wing credibility and credentials. And the first story, these are 2 stories. One of them, both of them signed by Glenn Greenwald, who is, on the surface, he's a U.S. columnist, big civil libertarian, I guess, up to a point. Doesn't seem to see much of the United States. Lives abroad, fine. But he now signs these 2 articles. We'll talk about the real origin of these stories in just a minute. The Wednesday story, headline, Obama taps your phones. Obama taps your phones. If you're a Verizon subscriber, the story is that Obama and the National Security Agency, under a court order from the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Supervision Act, the FISA court has given a court order allowing Obama's National Security Agency to essentially data mine the call data, the time of the call, the date of the call, unique identifiers, who is calling whom, the 2 parties to the call. apparently not the contents to the call. So what it is essentially the Bush warrantless wiretaps exposed by the New York Times in 2005, but now with a warrant, right, with a court order. So it's more extensive. You could say it's more intrusive. I'm against it. It's bad. It's totalitarian. We don't want it. I'm not interested in this. But the Bush, you have to say the Obama has increased the volume, although he's more respectful of the legal formalities. So that's number one. That's coming from Glenn Greenwald in the London Guardian. It's a scandal made in England. It comes in from the London Guardian. And then on Thursday, yesterday, the 6th of June, we've got the London Guardian once again, Glenn Greenwald and another guy telling you, Obama reads your email. Obama reads your email. This is Operation Prism. This is essentially all the main Internet companies, allegedly, they deny it. Google, Yahoo, Skype, Facebook, on and on, all the biggies, they all give the NSA direct, unfettered access to their servers. Now, they deny, I think Verizon denies at least parts of this story, and certainly many of these Internet companies deny the story. Google denies the story. So, again, that's something that started under Bush. Obama has increased it, but he's also got some legal technicalities going. I think he's got some kind of a court order on that one, too. But let's get to the bottom of this. Who is doing what to whom? These are weighty and important issues, but there are some that are weightier and more important. In other words, one thing is the kind of snooping that has been going on under Bush, and it all goes back to the authorization to use military force, supported by Ron Paul back in 2001, who voted for it. He was for it before he was against it. That's one thing. But a U.S. attack on Syria is a whole different kettle of fish, much more serious, much worse. Get the picture? A regional war in the Middle East with the United States as a protagonist with some token assistance from these rickety British and French, right, with their token forces, their tiny colonial armies. That's much worse, and that's the goal of these leaks. And we will explain how it works in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So here's the scandal overview in a nutshell. On the day that Qusair was liberated, that was Wednesday, the 5th of June, that's the day the scandals began. Qusair falls, the death squads are doomed unless there's foreign intervention. This can be seen. The French and the British are screaming for Obama to pull their chestnuts out of the fire, that the U.S. goes into war on the tail of the Anglo-French kite. And that same day, the Guardian unloads scandals on Obama to bash him and weaken him. And, of course, with Bush, there were these, revelations, the New York Times and so forth. Bush's base didn't care about that. Bush's base, totalitarian thinkers didn't care about civil liberties. Obama's base cares very much. This really hurts him. And, of course, his adulatory following out there in Europe also, that matters to him. That's one of his key assets. So the first one is Obama taps your phone with Verizon. The second one is the PRISM program, where all the main Internet companies are then snooped on by the National Security Agency. So both are NSA scandals, and both of them began before Obama. Right? This is a continuation, legalization, if you will, of Bush-instituted practices. Where Bush did it illegally, Obama has created this simulacrum of legality. Let me ask a question. How would Perfide Albion know about this? Why do we get these scandals from the London Guardian, even with Glenn Greenwald operating between Rio de Janeiro and Hong Kong, as he seems to do? Well, let's remind ourselves of certain structural features. There are the Anglo-American sharing agreements. There's one big coaxial cable, one big fiber optic that goes from the National Security Agency, Fort Meade, Maryland, and it goes across the pond to the GCHQ, General Communications Headquarters, Cheltenham, England. That's the British snooper base. And if you get a hold of the London Guardian or the London Daily Telegraph, which avidly picks up this same story, you can see a picture of it. This is a really imposing building, more so than the NSA. This is this big circular building. It looks like it's about a mile across. The GCHQ is huge because Britain is, of course, a pervasive police state. And what do we find? According to The Guardian of Friday, today, UK gathering secret intelligence via covert NSA operation. Nick Hopkins. What this underlines is that whatever Fort Meade, Maryland NSA knows, GCHQ Cheltenham knows it in real time. This is something only the British have. Only the British. The Israelis dream of this. The Israelis would do anything to have this. They don't have it unless, of course, the British send it on to them. And there are some suspicions in that regard. But what we're told now is that GCHQ can snoop on you in Britain, even do it legally, directly. The British tap in to their direct line to Fort Meade National Security Agency. That goes to GCHQ Cheltenham, and that way they get access to the entire PRISM snooping operation. Okay? The UK's electronic eavesdropping and security agency, GCHQ, has been secretly gathering intelligence from the world's biggest internet companies through a covertly run operation set up by America's top spy agency. Documents obtained by The Guardian reveal. This has been going on since June 2010. Almost 200 intelligence reports last year alone were generated. Now, that's the British part of it. We're told that this program, PRISM, is a Bush creation. PRISM was started by the Mad Dog Bush, the younger administration, in December 2007. The British have been tapping in since June 2010. I'm very suspicious of that because they get everything in real time. So the British can't do it to you directly. They'll go through the NSA and do it that way. So here's the idea. Now, that's how come they know. So we can't simply say, oh, boy, Glenn Greenwald, you're the wonderful Woodward and Bernstein of these new scandals, right? No, the way you can do it is once you know the program exists, then you fish around, you find some documents, and then you give them to Glenn Greenwald, and he can preen himself on the way that it turned out. Now, what is the answer to this in the immediate? Well, there are two things. Number one, Obama, don't do it. Do not attack Syria. Don't do it in a million years. Keep away. Butt out. Let these wonderful imperialists of London and Paris who want to recreate their empires, let them do that at their own expense. Those governments will fall like 10 pins, like bowling pins, when the public sees the casualty lists and the cost. These are both bankrupt states. So let's get real. Perfide Albion in particular now. The French don't have this, but the British do. And then, of course, with the British-French merger, the French, once again, you don't know, right? Here's what I say. I have been angry about this for decades. I say end the Anglo-American sharing agreements. Take that fiber optic cable that goes from NSA Fort Meade to Cheltenham GCHQ and cut it. Stop the British access. Don't let the British know what the U.S. knows. Let them, send in spies the way the Israelis have to do. We're sick and tired of this British using this stuff against the United States, right? In this case, they're attempting to use their access to U.S. secret intelligence to overthrow the current government of the United States and embroil this country in a disastrous, catastrophic, illegal war. They want the U.S. attacking Syria. Once again, they're willing to fight to the last American. And I would nod in the direction of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who has pointed out this is a British-French colonial lunatic enterprise, and the U.S. has no interest. We need to get back to that wonderful spirit of Suez, 1956, when it was the U.S. and the Soviets, the Russians in those days, who said no. The Russians said yet very loudly. The U.S. said, wait a minute, stop this. The British and the French were hysterical with the Israelis. They went on. This is what we see now. And Eisenhower and George Humphrey over at the Treasury said to the British, look, if you keep this up, we're going to dump the pound, right? So we'll sink you into the waters of the North Sea. And I remember seeing British Colonel Blimps, right, these British generals exploding with rage on television talk shows back in those days, 56, 57, right, that the operation was a military success, but it was the political side and those damned Americans that stopped it. The only reason the United States has any credibility in the Arab world, or ever did, comes from Suez, 1956. So this would be something to imitate. You want to save the U.S. reputation in the Arab and Islamic world, this would be a chance to do it. All right, so Clapper, the intelligence czar, admits that it exists, but the NSA only targets foreigners, be it with the telephone call data or with the PRISM operation. So that's the underlying reality. Now, all of this is reflected into the Bilderberg Group, meeting now today in Watford, England. I looked it up. It's not that far from Clifton, written Cliveden, the estate of Lady Nancy Astor, her husband, Lord Waldorf Astor, their close relative, Lord Vincent Astor, and others, Lord Lothian, Lord Brand, Lord Halifax, pro-Nazi. They were all pro-Nazi. So that atmosphere, right, the ghosts of Clifton are haunting Watford this week. And we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So again, the building blocks of the present situation. Qusair falls on Wednesday. The Syrian death squads are looking at annihilation and rout. On the same day, The Guardian begins unloading scandal material on Obama. There's a strong suspicion that this material was gathered by abusing the Anglo-American intelligence sharing between Fort Meade National Security Agency and Cheltenham GCHQ. Those agreements should be terminated as a matter of paramount national interest on this side. And then the scandals are taken up, we'll just look at this for a second, by all the chorus of pro-war European leftists. Oh, boy, that's really interesting, right? The pro-war, pro-austerity left, ready to fight to the last American, as usual. And the same thing, this is now reflected into Bilderberg. You can be sure that the majority of Bilderberg, the entire European side of Bilderberg, is Anglo-Dutch and French. Right? This is now one combo. The heirs of the Nazi SS and SA Prince Bernard, and they're going to want the neo-colonial adventure. So it's ironic, right? The people, some of the people outside Bilderberg are protesting. They're strongly anti-Obama. Well, the people inside agree. That's the problem with being a libertarian. If you're a libertarian, you're interested in killer austerity, right? The Bilderberg wants to destroy entitlements. They want to destroy economic rights, cut government services. The libertarians outside say, great, right on, let's end big government. And then the Bilderbergers say, we hate Obama. He ended the war in Iraq. He's ending the war in Afghanistan. He won't start the war in Syria. He did do the one in Libya, but that has come and gone now, so that's not so much a factor in the current calculus, horrible as it was. So Obama is now under attack from the Bilderbergers, and the people outside say, yeah, we hate Obama too. And so between austerity and out with Obama, now, of course, there is the war issue. Some of these libertarians would not be so happy, but by the time they get to that point, it's too late. You've destroyed the institutional basis for anything anti-war. Just take trade unions. Ron Paul and Rand Paul want to destroy all trade unions. How can you have any kind of a social movement against war if you don't start with some kind of a mass organization? Leading examples are trade unions. So by destroying them, these libertarians want to destroy the self-defense capabilities of the American people against tyranny and against foreign adventurers. So that's what's going on at Bilderberg. We'll get back to that in a while if we can. The Eurogawks and the Eurocrats. The French nostalgia of Vichy imperialism. Right now, it's worse than U.S. imperialism. U.S. imperialism is pulling in its horns to some extent. Yes, I know Obama does drones, assassinations. He does cyber warfare. He does economic sanctions. He does special forces raids to kill Obama, to kill Osama bin Laden, as I said. But that's not the big divisions. Right? That's pointed out by a guy in Le Monde. The London Independent, a guy called Coburn, Patrick Coburn, I think, he says, look, this was all hysterical. Assad was never going to fall. All the information that's been poured out of the Western media outlets is completely manufactured by these things like the Syrian Observatory, right? This Taylor in Coventry, England. It's all second or third hand. It's all inflated. It's all doctored. It's all fake. And Assad is not going to fall. But let's look at the immediate stuff. Le Monde, La Politique Antiterroriste de George W. Obama. George W. Obama goes on the front page, the main headline of Le Monde. Isn't that amazing? Oh, they're betraying the wonderful peace angel Obama. And notice they do it now. They don't do it. They're when he's attacking Libya 2 years ago, they're for him. But now that he's maybe learned his lesson, who knows? Now they're attacking him. Another interesting headline here, that the U.S. media almost unanimously, quasi unanimement, are attacking Obama because of his anti-civil liberties stuff. Vincent Michelot of Sciences Po Lyon reminds us Obama is not the anti-liberty, the liberticide monster that some people want you to think. Corriere della Sera, there's a tempest around Obama. Obama's in the tempest. The media are openly attacking him. Wow. Well, Obama, time to hang tough. These were, as you see, fair weather friends. Now, let's just look inside Syria a little bit. David Ignatius, strong intelligence community connections, comes on today on the NPR Weekly Review, and he says one of the reasons the rebels are going to be defeated is they have no central command. These are all autonomous, heteronomic, sort of self-steered terrorist brigades. They are death squads, as I've been saying the whole time, right? Look at my interview, Damascus, November 2011, death squads. That's what they are. I think I'm the first one in the world, quite possibly, to characterize them in this way. Ignatius says, look, they could never move forces from Aleppo to Damascus or from Homs to Qusair. Everything is piecemeal, but he wants to look on the bright side. Ignatius, he says, well, now, maybe this could force the unity of the rebels under a single command. No, it won't. And you're getting this stuff from Salim Idris, I know, and it's hopeless. They won't do it. The United States, remember, has troops and Patriot missiles in Jordan, but I think unlikely to cross into Syria at this point. As somebody was saying on this program, right, if you wanted to talk to the Syrian opposition, what phone number would you call? The Syrian National Coalition is now an obscene, bloody joke. It's horrendous. Now the French. The French are pushing this story of chemical weapons, and they're freaked out. They're hysterical that nobody cares, that nobody believes them, that the DGSE has got so much egg on its face, and they're so partial and so discredited that nobody gives a damn what they say, and the French are freaking out. The French are sending the proof of poison gas to the U.S., accompanied by a demand for an immediate attack. Well, the answer is no. Again, we're not interested in this kind of imperialist adventure. Hollande, obviously, Napoleon le Petit, fabulous, insolent, and impudent as always. The French specialty now is to make bad jokes about red lines. Oh, Obama, with your red line, is it a squiggly line? Is it a pink line? What kind of line it is? Well, we're not playing word games here. There are lives at stake, and the answer is no. Now, Matt Fry, leading British journalist also on the program NPR this morning, he says, in London, they're very frustrated by Obama's obscurantism. London is frustrated by Obama's obscurantism. He made the pledge of the red line, and he won't live up to it. Of course, that pledge was made in the heat of an election campaign with the warmonger madman Bishop Romney, apocalyptic as always, right, planning to preside over a planet in the afterlife. It's perhaps understandable that Obama went over the red line and formulated the red line, but we don't care about the red line. We want peace. The American people are sick of war. They're sick of foreign intervention, and in this sense, Obama has the people on his side. Now let's look at Turkey. As I said before, the trigger of what's going on in Turkey is Syria. The presence of terrorists massively. For months, there have been these protest marches, protest demonstrations in the cities of southern Turkey, from Iskenderun, then over around the border area. These have all been ignored by Al Jazeera and the BBC. They're not interested. But now let's look. One big goal of playing Turkey against Syria is to destroy Turkey. And maybe there are people who would like to do that under the current situation. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, reminding you my New York City appearance of the season here, the summer. Spring-summer is June 9th, Sunday, June 9th at noon, Pace University within the framework of the Left Forum. The Left Forum, look that up. Big detailed webpage tells you all about it. Noon Sunday. It's near City Hall in Lower Manhattan, New York City. Now, the scandals, the Verizon phone information, phone tapping, I suppose, but not really because it's only the exterior details, and the infamous PRISM. These scandals come from the British. The London Guardian is the organ of both of them. The Washington Post hurries to catch up. As a matter of fact, we have an article here from the Huffington Post that it was rumors that the Guardian had the stuff that goaded the Washington Post to try to catch up. So the Washington Post is between 6 to 8 hours late to 1 to 2 days late compared to the Guardian. This is nothing new. We've seen it before. Let's go back to the early years of Clinton Gate. The initial Clinton scandals before the appointment of the special prosecutor, the things that got the special prosecutor going, appointed with the help of Moynihan, the right-wing Democrat, were Troopergate and Whitewater Gate, the Whitewater property scandal, so-called, and the Troopergate. And where were these pushed? Not in the U.S. press primarily, but primarily in the British press. And in those days, it was the London Daily Telegraph that was the flagship of the scandal. And we had columnist Peregrine Worthshorn, thought to be the illegitimate child of the monster Lord Montague Norman, Hitler's financier, Hitler's man at the Bank of England, the governor of the Bank of England, the currency dictator of Europe, the father of the current IMF system in many ways. Lord Norman and his offspring or scion, Peregrine Worthshorn, raving anti-American British Tory. And then Ambrose Evans Pritchard, son of the anthropologist, we think. I remember confronting him at the National Press Club here. You can also find testimony by me to a House Appropriations subcommittee back in those years, pointing to the fact that the entire Whitewater Gate, Troopergate, and related scandals were coming from British sources. And we also had the Emmett Terrell operation with all the British backers that this had. So this time around, it's not the Washington Post, it's not the London Daily Telegraph, it's the London Guardian, again with center-left profile. So they're out in front, and they're goading the Washington Post and the rest of them. Now, the Washington Post, of course, house organ of the Federal Reserve, always interested in weakening the presidency. Almost doesn't matter who the president is, although they prefer the reactionary ones. So there we go. It is a British scandal made in England. Perfide Albion attacks Obama, as we've now shown. So Turkey there are basically two things at work here, right? One element is the protests are authentic in the sense that they start from the fact that the Turkish people aren't interested in Erdogan's lunatic neo-Ottoman policy, expanding at the expense of Syria. They don't want the war with Syria. They don't want the death squads and jihadis running all over Turkey. So that has been going on. That had been systematically ignored until it now broke out. But now you can see, with the attitude of the Anglo-American media, they seem to be saying, well, if we can get a destabilization of Turkey out of this, we'll take it. And I'm against that. As a friend of Turkey, as I've often said, I deplore Erdogan. I tell Erdogan to cease and desist. Maybe Erdogan will have to go. It's beginning to look like he's incorrigible and will have to go. But this, of course, is up to the internal forces. I'm not going to join in a color revolution from the outside, and there are elements of color revolution that have now been thrown into the operation. So Erdogan and the economy, right, there's a certain economic basis. There's a world depression after all. Turkey has been doing better than some countries, but now after 500% growth over the last 5 or 6 years, they have lost out. There's a lot of hot money in Turkey, which now may be departing them. And there is the fact that with this Syrian crisis, the Syrian crisis is not just the war and the death squads passing through, but it's also that Erdogan goes more and more into the Saudi, Qatar orbit, Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan, and a lot of secular elements, which are, I think, very valid in Turkey, right? The grand tradition of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. He is, of course, on my short list of the greats of the 20th century. The greats are Dr. Sun Yat-sen of China, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, de Gaulle of France, and precisely Ataturk of Turkey, right? It's the only country defeated in World War I that did not go under fascist rule. So, best wishes to Turkey, and if they decide that it's time to oust Erdogan, this is not going to be easy to do. I don't think this is on the agenda just now, but there is a perfectly viable opposition party, and I think it's called the CHP, and that's an interesting proposition. So we're certainly open to learning more about that. Now, Egypt descending into chaos, right? We've had this moment where the U.S. NGOs, massively interfering in Egypt's internal affairs, have been convicted. Not just the U.S. ones, right? The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung of the CDU, Merkel's party, probably spreading, austerity hysteria in Egypt. The question in Egypt is always the second revolution, right? And will the Nasserists come forward? Those could be political Nasserists with Hamdin Sabahi. They can be military Nasserists coming from the middle ranks, the junior officers in the army. But I think this is going to come to some kind of a head this year. And finally, what is it that the British and the French want Obama to do? There are really two things. One is the creation of a no-fly zone. Right? The French and British are explicitly demanding that. The no-fly zone is, of course, a comprehensive bombing campaign of the entire country, lasting at least a week. In the case of Syria, right, you got to bomb every airport, you've got to bomb every radar, you got to bomb every air defense facility, surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, and all the rest of it. You got to use cruise missiles. You've got to use standoff missiles. You've got to use all kinds of aircraft. That's number one. And then you got to maintain a constant combat air patrol above the country, even as more and better missiles can arrive and certainly will arrive. But then there's this question of the chemical sites. If there are a dozen chemical sites alleged, then you've got to invade. You've got to send in commandos. You've got to send in a battalion of paratroopers for each one of those 12 chemical sites. That gets you into a ground war. This is what the British and the French want the U.S. to do. And the answer, once again, is no. Nix. There is now the Geneva Conference, of course, sponsored by Russia and the United States. According to Ibrahimi, this has gone from June to July. The Syrian government is ready to go and ready to participate. Foreign Minister Moallem has been designated as the head of the Syrian delegation. Where are the terrorists? Where are the death squads? They say no, they won't go unless Assad leaves or hangs himself or whatever it is, and they won't go unless Hezbollah leaves. Well, I'm sorry. The foreign fighters came in on the anti-Assad side, right? From half the world, foreign fighters came in, including from France and Britain, and now they're screaming about Hezbollah. What hypocrisy. They should shut up. They should go to the conference or be damned. Probably the latter. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. It's a slideshow of 41 PowerPoint slides that describes the PRISM plan. It was obtained by The Guardian. Then the Washington Post found it out, and you can see some of the slides in today's Washington Post, that is of the 7th of June, but it's a scandal made in London. The flagship is the London Guardian, so echoes of Clinton Gate, Trooper Gate, Whitewater Gate, Ambrose Evans Pritchard, and the infamous Peregrine Worthshorn of the Montague Norman family. Today, Glenn Greenwald. But again, I'm telling you that it's got to do with that sharing agreement. That's how they know what to look for. And that sharing agreement must be terminated. And let them scream bloody murder. But they have abused it, and we're sick of it. And we don't want this Siamese twin relationship, right? The special relationship is antiquated, it's absurd and obsolete. There never was a common ground between the colonialists and the United States. So then we've gone through decades of very bloody lessons in that regard. The anti-colonial position of MacArthur and Roosevelt was the correct one, and any departure from that has been tragic for the United States. Now, a word about Pakistan, right? We've just had the Pakistan election, the first peaceful transition of power in the recent history of Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif comes in on an anti-drone platform. We join him in the anti-drone part. However, Nawaz Sharif represents, as far as I can see from here, a combination of political Islam and laissez-faire neoliberal economics. And that will not work. And it is, if you're going to be neoliberal and laissez-faire, that negates the social solidarity, which is one of the principal components of the Muslim faith and social policy. It won't work. And you will not be stable. You will not have stability in Pakistan using neoliberal laissez-faire methods. That's good for some oligarchs. That's good for the paper-thin 2 or 3% or the 1%, but not for the main part of the population. Obama's meeting with President Xi of China this afternoon. The U.S. media are really going wild about alleged Chinese hacker attacks into all kinds of U.S. institutions sponsored by the Chinese government, and I'm afraid that there is some basis for these charges. Well, of course, if that's what's happening, then you better defend yourselves, right? You better at least create, if there's a Great Wall of China, you can come up with your own line of defense. Everybody's screaming that China may dump U.S. Treasury securities. If China dumps them, the Federal Reserve will be forced by the American people to buy them, and that will stabilize everything. You don't need to go groveling to foreign countries or to zombie banks to buy your government paper. You've got your own bank. It's called the Federal Reserve. Bridle it, get it back under legal control, rip it out of the hands of the Wall Street zombie bankers and hedge fund hyenas who dominate it. And, of course, Elizabeth Warren has shown the way. There's another very important point. The message to Obama is you better come up with a jobs program. We need 30 million jobs as a target. You better come up with 5 to 10 million jobs in the next year or so, and it's going to have to be paid for by the Federal Reserve, or you will be impeached. You will be overthrown by some combination of this stuff. General Petraeus is at Bilderberg. Petraeus is there with Henry Kravis, with Marie-José Kravis, with this guy Gefeller. There's an entire Petraeus faction at Bilderberg, and they are grooming him, I would say, for higher office, for regime change in the United States. And this has got to be warded off. And, of course, the poor, benighted protesters in many cases can't understand that this is what's going on. The word from some of them is that there's a fight inside Bilderberg about whether there should be transparency or not, and that Peter Thiel, Ron Paul's angel from last year, Peter Thiel is the good faction because he wants transparency and openness, and then the bad old guys, right, Kissinger and so forth, they don't want it. This is absolute fairy tale. If you believe that, then that's an insult to your intelligence, and I don't know what I can do for you, honest to God. But Petraeus is there, and they're grooming him. He's not out of the game. He is, of course, the focus of Bonapartist tendencies inside the U.S. government, has been for many years. He's the darling of the neocons. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's a Bilderberg habitué. I think this is his fourth Bilderberg meeting. Henry Kravis has got a $4 billion fortune. Marie-José has got the Hudson Institute. This guy Gefeller has got the contacts to ExxonMobil and the State Department, and you can see the way in which this is being put together. The new KKR Global Institute with Ken Mailman. Ken Mailman, political hack, no good for global trends, but plenty good to assemble Republican wheel horses, reactionary political operatives, if you want to get a faction to take over. So if you take this further down the road, just keep screaming about IRS and Benghazi as if Obama did it. You want to know about Benghazi? Grill Petraeus and grill some ham. Grill Carter ham. Then you know why the stand-down orders were issued. And, of course, we're supposed to have our bleeding hearts for the Associated Press and James Rosen. Time will tell, but it's better to have a constitutionally elected president, all in all, than some kind of a coup regime of the kind that seems to be fermenting here a little bit behind the scenes. But the question for Obama is none of this works unless you've got a jobs program of 5 to 10 million jobs. Elizabeth Warren shows the way. She shows you the way to begin solving, and indeed to largely, at least to stabilize the student loan crisis by making the Federal Reserve pay. You call up Bernanke and you say, Helicopter Ben, guess what? Today you're going to do something great for your country. Up to now you've been opening these credit stimulus windows, the TAF, the TALF, and all the rest of them. There's a whole toxic alphabet soup of these things. You can look them up. The credit stimulus facilities of 09 to 10, and some of them are still going. Some of them directly for certain companies, right? Maiden Lane. That's just AIG, nothing more. We want to have that on a broader scale. We want $3.6 trillion minimum for an infrastructure program. We're told that for $1 billion, according to some people's calculus, we'll have to look into it, you can get almost 50,000 jobs. I don't know if I like that because the capital investment per job may not be enough, but you get the idea. One phone call. You don't even have to talk to Boehner. Call Helicopter Ben. Tell him, open that window or else. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, we have a special guest. I'm very glad to welcome him. William Araujo is the, or will shortly be, the Green Party candidate for governor of New Jersey in that election, which will be held in November. So he will be going up against Chris Christie, and there is a Democratic candidate, as I understand it. We'll get more about the details of this race. But Mr. Araujo has been gathering signatures. We want to get a report about that, the current state of affairs, and generally look in on this very important New Jersey election. Virginia and New Jersey, of course, the ones that in an off year like this really set the tone and then tend to determine what happens in the congressional election of the following year. So let me welcome Mr. Araujo. Are you there? Hello? Mr. Araujo? Okay, we're just having a technical problem. There's an entire story to be told here about the machinations of the Democratic Party, their unwillingness to hold an honest primary, their desire to exclude people, the same sad story that we see with the Democrats so often, right, trying to use administrative methods to stifle new voices, the things that would actually make their party more viable. But then there's the Green Party, too. So we're lucky that there's another vehicle, and you can have a very qualified candidate on the Green Party line and, play an important role in such an election. So let's see if William Araujo, his name, let me just spell it for you. It's Araujo. William Araujo. We're going to get him to tell us the proper pronunciation. And, of course, Mr. Araujo?
Mr. Webster.
Hello?
Yes, hello. You
Hello?
there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you'll have to excuse me. I introduced you at some length, but we want to welcome you. We want to thank you for coming on the program. Now, we got about 20 minutes, a little bit less. What I would urge you to do is to take the floor and tell us, first of all, about yourself, about your campaign, about your program. Where are you in terms of gathering signatures, getting on the ballot, things like this? And then maybe we can talk also about, the opposition, about Christie, about the Democratic candidate as we go towards this election. But please figure that most people don't know anything about New Jersey and give it to us all from the very elementary level.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Webster, for allowing me to be on your show. I'm not running in the Green Party, though. Just want to, correct that. But my name is William Araujo. My father is Portuguese. My mother's Brazilian. Married to a woman for 24 years. She's Puerto Rican, so I have, diversity. And, we decided to get involved.
Can I just ask you, are you using a speakerphone or a cordless?
No, I'm on my cell phone.
Okay, fine. I guess this is the best we're going to do. We'll do the best we can. Go ahead, please.
All right, sounds good. Well, I decided to get involved in 2009. I ran for mayor in Edison Township because, the taxes were sky high. Talking to people, you just like, what can we do? So, we gather some people, and they say, Willie, we want you to run for mayor. So I ran for mayor, and to make a long story short, I didn't win the primary, but I got noticed by the party as a guy who's really willing to stand up for the people. So fast forward, I lost the election. I was appointed to the planning board for Edison Township. I served my community as auxiliary officer. I'm married for over 24 years. I have a son that's in the Air Force. I have a daughter that's in college, and now I have more time to, be active, with the community. And the question came, said, listen, we want you to run for governor. And I said, well, why governor? I said, well, because no one there right now is listening to us, and they get into office, and they all tell you the right things, and they're not doing anything. So we started our crusade. When I was running the primary, we got good signatures. We went in, and we weren't going to the political bosses because the political bosses, I called them, and only one responded. And out of 21 counties, 21 chairpersons, no one called me to say, hey, we'll meet with you, and what's your ideas? And that's how we got started. So when they got the signatures to run in the primaries, and then they challenged our signatures, and they're removing everything.
Now, let me just get it straight. The they means the Democratic Party at this point,
yes,
right?
Yes, the Democratic Party. That is correct.
Okay, the Democratic Party. Again, please give us the details because we don't know.
Okay, yeah. So they challenged us in the primary with the signatures, and they were taking off everything from who was not registered, who was in deleted status, to I had a lot of seniors. They signed my petition, and my objection to the judge was these are old people. They can't sign the way they used to when they first registered. They can't see as well, but this is their signature. But they were just knocking it out. So at that rate, once you fall below 1,000, if you don't have 1,000 registered signatures, you're automatically out. So I can see that it was going nowhere. So, my wife and I decided, okay, we'll take a back seat and see where it goes from there. But all of a sudden, we're getting calls from all over the state of New Jersey saying, hey, you got to continue to fight. It's not fair what they did to you. They talk about, helping the middle-class family out. They talk about teaching us how to get involved. And when I do get involved, then they knock you down. So I got a call from the Peace and Freedom from Darcy party. And he says that they want to work with us, and we took it from there. And now we've actually went in and signed to run as an independent candidate. We got well over 600 signatures above the 800 what's required, and the people are actually happy out there. I mean, the union teachers like what we're doing, the police and fire department likes what we're doing, and our message is very strong. And they want us back, so we just can't stop, and that's why we continue our fight.
Okay, now. The Darcy is, of course, Darcy Johnson. My listeners remember Darcy Johnson from last year. He was a presidential candidate on the Democratic ballot, and this was the opposition, the alternative to Obama. And Darcy has got strong connections to the Peace and Freedom Party. People may remember that. It goes back to the 1960s. I think they ran Eldridge Cleaver, if I'm not mistaken, in 1968, but it still exists. It's strong in California and some other states, in Florida and New Jersey. So you're going to be an independent. Now, can you tell us who is your opposition, what do they represent, and how are you different?
Well, I'll be running against Chris Christie, who's the current governor, and then we have the Democratic woman who was going to be running. Her name is Barbara Bono. And, both of these individuals, they're career politicians. One doesn't care how much we spend, and the other one keeps taxing us to death. So that's, I think, coming in with a fresh idea, looking at the Elizabeth Warren bill, I think it makes sense. And I'm looking at to see the Wall Street 1% sales tax that's on your website. I think it's phenomenal. And I don't know why none of these two individuals talk about it. So that goes to show you that they cater to the 1%. And I think that looking at your platform, looking at the Peace and Freedom platform, and looking at what my platform is building infrastructure, decreasing the taxes. I think this is going to work out very, very well. And then we get a lot of great feedback coming out to us.
All right, great. So that's the Warren-Tierney bill to cut the interest rate on student loans to 0.75%, not 3.4%, not 4%, not 8.5%, not 12%. But less than 1%, 3/4 of 1%, right? And that's great, and that's going to be with us the whole year. And the 1% Wall Street sales tax, that's tremendous. I mean, there are a lot of the what can we say? The back office of Wall Street is actually in Secaucus and other places in northern New Jersey. Got to hang on with us 1 second. That's our first segment is now ending, and we'll be back in just a minute. We got another 10 minutes. So you can tell us more. Back in a minute. Welcome back to our final segment today on World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We're honored to be joined by William Araujo. He is the independent candidate, independent on the New Jersey ballot. We're pretty sure. The alternative to the two bankrupt candidates, that is Chris Christie, and we know him, and the little-known Democrat Barbara Bono, some kind of a Democratic Party hack from the state legislature. And Mr. Araujo is running on a program that includes the Warren-Tierney bill, cut the student loan interest rate to 0.75%, and the 1% Wall Street sales tax, which would be the solution for any budget woes in New Jersey, right? Roll back all austerity and get back to the path of economic development. Mr. Araujo, before we go any further, can you tell us if people want to join your campaign, they want to volunteer, they want to contribute, they want to help, can you give us all the ways that they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I'll give you. We're going to have a website coming out, a brand new website coming out soon. But I'll give you my telephone number. It's 646-463-4868, and my email address is williamarujo@live.com.
Okay. Now, do you have any campaign events scheduled that we could announce now? Anywhere people can come and meet and greet, so to speak?
Yeah, well, right now we're still in that transition period where I did hand in the signatures, so there is a 4-day challenging period that anyone can challenge. So once that's done, we're very confident that we can go on and start our campaign headquarters and start our meet and greet sessions.
Okay, now that challenge period, right? You tell us you deposited the signatures when, and when do we get the definitive word that you're certified on the ballot as an independent for governor of New Jersey?
Yes, thank Webster. We filed on Tuesday, and by Monday we should know if anyone challenged us. If we don't hear anything from the office, then we're good to go.
Okay, and so far no challenge.
Not as of yet, my friend.
Okay. Now, as soon as you get certified, please send me a release, and I can put it on my Twitter feed and put it out for you in other ways, and you're going to want to send that around. All right. So in terms of the campaign, I mean, I look at the New Jersey Republicans, and for a long time they were famous for having these blue blood candidates for governor, right? They had the blue blood Tom Kaine, who sounded like he was from an English boarding school. And then they had Christine Todd Whitman, the horsewoman and environmentalist. And now they've got this guy who's sort of he seems to be rather more on the thuggish side, right? But he tries to be a blue-collar governor, right? That's Christie. This woman, Bono, I do not know. But talk to us about the dynamics of New Jersey politics. I mean, who is most dissatisfied with Christie? We've also had this awful thing that Obama has built up Christie probably as a way of saving himself, but that's really reprehensible what Obama has done.
Right. Well, you know what? I think the last, I would say, 10 elections that I can recall. I'm only 43 years old. We haven't had a real solid candidate that's going to represent the people. They represent other interests. If you look at our tax bracket, it's just been going sky high. Christie tells you all the things you want to hear, but if you look at the budget, he just increases the budget. I mean, this year alone, the budget's going to go another $1.3 billion from last year. We're going to be at $32.9 billion. And there's just no way in sight. He cuts funding for the after-school programs. He cuts funding for the home state rebate for the seniors. So, if you don't pay attention to what he's saying, it's one thing, but what he's doing is a total different aspect. And then we have my opponent, Barbara Bono, another one. If you look at her history, it's just a tax on every single thing, from working out tax to buying new tires tax to making a cell phone call tax. It's just, listen, if you're going to get into this field to help the people, it's got to be to help the people. And I was on 101.5 the other day, New Jersey station, and a lot of callers were saying how we have to put term limits as for governor. And I wholeheartedly agree. If I get in there as governor, it's going to be a 2-term limit, and that should be it. You can't stay there forever. Career politicians shouldn't be there for a long time in the system because they get too comfortable. They start looking for a paycheck all the time. They like the benefits coming in, and that's not what this is designed to do. It's designed to get in there, work for the people, bring back fiscal responsibility to the state, and then move on from there. But,
of course, term limits, notoriously a process reform often pushed by Republicans. And the problem with term limits is when the average working family looks at term limits, they say, what does that mean to me? It means nothing. Working families need immediate relief, right? I know people in Edison. I'm interested that you're from there. The impression I always got from them is they're crushed by the fact that the automobile insurance is out of this world. I mean, compared to other metropolitan areas here in the D.C. area, the automobile insurance is out of this world, and the local property tax. And, of course, what you're saying now about this woman, Bono, is that she deals in regressive taxation, right, the kinds of taxes that hit wage earners and lower and middle-income people. And, of course, what we need is a progressive tax so that it's precisely this Wall Street sales tax. And I would say that the main issue is it's not so much how much are you spending, because in many ways you need to spend more, but are you willing to open up new sources of income? And that mainly means Wall Street, because, again, part of, if not the heart of Wall Street, at least the liver and the stomach of Wall Street is all in Secaucus and places like this in northern New Jersey.
That is correct, my friend. You hit that one on the head. The Wall Street sales site, and you know better than anybody else, it creates trillions of dollars, and when traded stocks, bonds, or any other futures, and we're missing out on that. They're not being taxed. So this is a two-way fold. The state can make money, and the federal government can also make money at the same time. So why these individuals don't talk about it is I don't understand it. Why they don't say it. That can alleviate it could bring back so much money. We can cut the budget from $32 billion within 1 year. We can reduce it to about $28 billion, and the following year it could be reduced to another 24%. And when you bring that money in, you can reduce the taxes for the homeowners because it's an average $8,000 per year. We can cut those taxes right down to probably $4,000 to $5,000 because that money can go into the school system, can go to the municipalities, and also to the freeholders and the bridges and the roads. And that's the most important thing. And that is the only way you're going to drive down the property tax. At the same time, you're going to create jobs because I'm huge in infrastructure as far as rebuilding our roads. Chris Christie, as soon as he got into office, he had the opportunity to build a tunnel going from New Jersey right into New York. He stopped it. We're going to get over $1 billion in federal funds. It cost New Jersey over $300 million just to back out of the deal, and it cost about 6,000 jobs right there alone. Could have been for about 2.5 years. So as far as I see him as looking for the future for New Jersey, I don't think he's got that vision. Right now, we got billions of dollars coming in from the feds for Hurricane Sandy. He's already spent over $300 million just to hire outside firms from Florida and Ohio. How do you generate jobs for Jersey when you're giving that money out to other states? That's not the way it should be. I think that the money comes in here. If you're a governor for the state of New Jersey, you have to look out for the interests of New Jersey, not your constituents, not for your long-term goal. And we all know there's been a lot of talk that he wants to run for president, but he cannot use our state to propel him to go into running for a United States president. That we can't happen, and we can't let that happen, my friend.
All right, that's excellent. I mean, one of the things we've always done on this program is we have been repeatedly critical of Christie, condemning him for not building that tunnel under the Hudson River and everything that goes with it, right? Because that imposes real hardships on people who have to commute, be it by car or by train, right? Because those tunnels are about 100 years old, and you do need infrastructure. So that's wonderful. We warmly welcome your candidacy, and let me just invite people. We'll try to post the email and other contact information, and we wish you all the best. And please come back and talk to us soon after you've been certified and when you get into the early phase of the campaign. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I appreciate it. We're also on Facebook too. Okay.
Facebook, okay. And it's ARAUJO. That's your independent candidate for governor of the great state of New Jersey. And we'll be back next week. Politicians, vaguely leftists, people like Guy Mollet, Mendes France, people like this in the colonial wars of France, they're very bad. And that seems to be what we have now with Hollande and Fabius, right? We have the Vichy nostalgia, right? The desire for the French Empire. And it took de Gaulle a long time to get around to this, but de Gaulle actually finally concluded that the empire is a millstone around your neck. It's an albatross. You don't want it. It doesn't help you. It deprives you of all the trump cards you have in the world political situation. But this does not stop. Cameron, Haig, Hollande, Fabius are demanding that Obama attack Syria. This is the main point of world politics right now. The hysterical campaign of the Anglo-French imperialists, London and Paris, the governments, but the entire establishment, and you see this reaches into so-called left news organs like The Guardian and so forth. They are operating to try to push Obama into this disastrous war. And I call upon anybody of goodwill, but in the United States in particular, and I also would hope that Russia would recognize this situation and do everything possible. It is imperative that Obama not be pushed into this. It's clear that he doesn't want to do it. He wants to lead from behind, right? His policy, as developed by Zbigniew Brzezinski and others, is buck passing. If you want to get rid of Syria, you get the French and the British to attack Syria. Well, why don't they do it then? Obviously, because they're afraid. They know they will lose. They know that their rickety aviation will be decimated by those S-300s, and the older models are there already, make no mistake. And their one aircraft carrier is going to get sent to the bottom by one of those Yakontsk missiles, and they'll be dealing with a Russian squadron in the Eastern Mediterranean, which is also not what they bargained for. These are imperialists, but it's a very peculiar kind of imperialist, right? They're cringing in regard to the powerful, but then they're running wild, trampling on the weak. So they're always eager to find defenseless targets. This, of course, extends into the U.S. establishment, too. But in the case of the Anglo-French, it's even more marked. Now, remember, the Anglo-French are one unit. They have signed various deals where they have essentially merged their military. Neither one can act without the other. So that's what you're dealing with. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, reminding you that my New York City appearance is scheduled for Sunday at noon. That's Sunday, June 9th at Pace University in the framework of the Left Forum, noon to 2, panel with Tom Kiley and J.C. Calhoun. You can find it at the very detailed website. And this is a big event, right? 1,500 speakers, several thousand people attending. The strategic situation in a nutshell. The entire destabilization of Syria is on the brink of collapse. The death squads, the killers, the jihadis, the enemies of civilization have received a catastrophic defeat with the fall of Qusair, thanks to Hezbollah and the Syrian army. Qusair is now liberated. It can no longer be used for gun running and other illegal activities. It's interesting. The Anglo-French wanted to have a UN resolution condemning the fall of Qusair, and Russia said, why didn't you have a resolution the first time around when the death squads took over? There you weren't worried. Now you're worried. The legal government of a UN member state has re-extended its administration. And you're going to find that people who have been in Qusair, people who have been in parts of Aleppo, the misrule, the reign of terror, the hell on earth created by these bearded Gulf monarchies, this city has now fallen. This is Stalingrad. From now on, in my view, unless something outside happens, it's all downhill for the death squads. This was a battle of annihilation. It was a battle of encirclement. Hezbollah coming in from the west and the Syrian army coming in from the east. Syrian Air Force active, heavy bombardment, many, many terrorists killed. The Syrian army is killing more terrorists than the U.S. ever dreamed of. And these are real, honest-to-God terrorists. Now, of course, they're not capable of flying planes into buildings, but they can kill lots of women and children. As I've always said, they can blow up a bus. They can blow up a supermarket. They can snipe at women and children, as I've heard in the streets of Homs. So they're cowards, but they're murderous cowards. So these people have now gotten part of what's coming to them. But, of course, that's an entire CIA secret army that has been put on the road to annihilation. I mean, you can see from now on, the government forces are gaining at Damascus. The government forces are gaining near Aleppo. The government forces are going to be in a strong position in Homs. And the rebels, I think, are going to be tend to be driven back to a narrow band along the Turkish border. And even that area is now in some question because, as we will talk about, one of the main issues, probably the main issue of these protests against Erdogan is that he has thrown open the doors of Turkey to terrorists of every stripe from all over the world. We reported already last year, if you were a tourist in Iskenderun, Turkey, in that port, you would go into your five-star hotel and there'd be some bearded butcher fresh off the plane or the boat from Libya in the next room with God knows what kind of weapons and so forth in the elevator. So this is bad news. And, of course, the Nusra brigades have brought sarin, poison gas. They've set bombs. They've obviously, robbed a lot of people, kidnapped a lot of people. This is a plague of locusts. These are the enemies or some of the enemies of civilization in our time. So there have been demonstrations in southern Turkey for months and months and months calling on Erdogan, get these terrorists off our back, get them out of here. And Erdogan, with Obama whispering in his ear about the future greatness of the Turkic empire, right? The Turanian empire, right? It goes all the way to the North Pole and the gates of China, according to these megalomaniacs. Well, that's a bridge too far, I think. Erdogan in big trouble. So even the logistics, the hinterland, the logistical depth of the death squads is now in danger for that reason. And now we get to the central issue. The British and the French. The Entente Cordiale of 1904, created by King Edward VII, the main architect of the First World War, even though he had died by the time it broke out, he created this alliance system in Europe that led to this monstrosity of World War I. Out of that comes fascism, World War II, Cold War, and we're just coming up for air. But now our dear friends want to plunge us back into chaos because if you're the British oligarchy, that's the only way you can survive. So the Entente Cordiale of 1904, the Anglo-French, the Sykes-Picot powers, the people who designed this Middle East, remember the peace to end all peace? They're the ones who did this, all of these dysfunctional borders and whatever, and obviously we don't want to change them now because they've been around for almost 100 years. And Suez, 1956, the withered mummy of British imperialism and the withered mummy of French Vichy imperialism. And it is interesting to see the role of so-called French socialists. Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. My first point is to urge you to consider, if you're anywhere near the New York area, think of attending the Left Forum, which is being held on Friday the 7th, Saturday the 8th, and Sunday the 9th of June at Pace University, downtown Manhattan by City Hall. City Hall subway stops will get you there, Pace University. And at noon, high noon on Sunday, I'm going to be part of a panel along with the distinguished INN radio host Tom Kiley and J.C. Calhoun of Denver, Colorado, once and future congressional candidate, according to some, and a group of others will be there. And I urge you to come. I'd say if that's essentially, if you're hearing this on Saturday, you can come over on Sunday. The more the merrier. So that's number one. Now, the strategic situation, it's extremely interesting. And we have the following conjunction, the following situation of a number of factors converging. Number one, Qusair, the fall of the main death squad fortress the Stalingrad of the death squads and terrorists and jihadis of Nusra and the Al-Qaeda forces coming in from Iraq and the jihadis from all over the world, Taliban, Somalis, Chechens, Libyans, basically every terrorist on the planet has undergone the gravitational pull of the war on Syria, launched by NATO with the help of the Israelis and financed by Saudi, by Qatar, by the other reactionary